Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Chairman, distinguished elders, brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, wa assalamu alaikum, peace be on all of you. Like everyone else, I suspect I'm much affected by the video presentation that we just witnessed. I had several times to look away, even though I knew all the stories, even though I saw all the footage before, somehow presented in the way that it was. It summed up what our dear brother just called insanity, called inhumanity, indeed a crime against humanity. And it's a little difficult to return to the normal discourse in the face of what we have just seen. I'm speaking every day in the United States. This month for 10 days, in 10 states, 10 cities, several states. Last month I spoke in 15 cities, 19 speeches, 4 of them to Canada, which had to be made by video presentation, a subject to which I shall return. Next month I shall spend another 15 days or so in the United States. For 2 reasons. First of all, I believe that this is the time and this is the place that we can and we must change the course of these events. I have, as the introduction said, been involved in this Palestinian question since the midsummer of 1975, when entirely by chance, in an ordinary Scottish town, where I had never met a Palestinian, I had never met an Arab, I had never met a Muslim. I was 21 years old, an activist in the labor movement. I was alone in the Labour Party office when the doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer because I was busy and had no authority to deal with callers. But something, Kismet, destiny, made me answer the door. And there stood a young and handsome Palestinian student. He looked like Omar Sharif, but all Arabs looked like Omar Sharif to me then. He said, I want to come in and talk to the leaders about Palestine. This was in midsummer, 1975. I told him, there are no leaders here, but you can talk to me and I will talk to them. And after 2 hours, in which he mesmerizingly described the catastrophe which had enveloped, overwhelmed his people, I was a signed up member of the Palestinian resistance, which I remain until this day and until the last day of my life. And I warn our adversaries that I have, mashallah, a 2-year-old boy, Zainuddin George Galloway, and he will come after me. If we don't see a free Palestine in my life, in his life, we will see this Palestine. Within 2 years, I was in Beirut, living amongst the Palestinian people, living in the camps, then little known, later famous throughout the world, of Sabra and Shatila. And there I met my friend Ron Mackay, who's with me today, 32 years later, we're still on the road fighting for Palestine. We're still together. Many wives have come and gone in that 32 years, but we're still together at least. It must tell you something. I don't know what, but it must tell you something. We who were there in the mid-70s saw many terrible things befall the Palestinian people, who had been hunted from Jordan some years before, who had been hunted from Palestine some years before, who were later to be hunted from Lebanon, thousands of miles to the four corners of the earth, scattered as refugees, the lucky ones here in beautiful California, the unlucky living in rancid refugee camps around the region, or even in their own country under occupation. Their country had been wiped off the map, no longer existed. Their people without passports, without papers, without status, who had suffered this, one of the greatest crimes of the 20th century, and to whose injury was added the insult that they who were the victims of terrorism on a mass scale were to be described as the terrorists. And those who had committed the huge act of terrorism against them were to be described as the victims of terrorism. This insult was extended to me last month when Canada described me, a 23-year member of the British Parliament, 5 times elected, who has never raised a hand in violence against anyone in my life, except in a boxing ring, and that doesn't count. I was declined entry to Canada as a terrorist, which will come as a surprise to the British parliamentary authorities, amongst whom I've been sitting these last 2.5 decades. It will come as a surprise to the Homeland Security Division in the United States, whose country I'm traveling widely and addressing huge meetings such as this. But of course it's a preposterous lie. It is the Palestinians who are the victims of terrorism, and people like me who are standing up for the victims of terrorism. And the idea that we who stand by those people you just watched on the video, that we are the criminals, is a perversion of language and concept, which I must say, after all these years of involvement in this question, I still have to pinch myself to believe that others cannot see this picture as we have just seen it. There are many lies which are used to confuse, to throw sand in the eyes of the public we must try to persuade. One is that somebody like me speaking like this is somehow anti-American. Let me tell you that I am the great-grandson of definitely the only woman in the entire 19th century who emigrated from America to Scotland. I think she got on the wrong boat, but that's what happened. The records show she sailed from New York to Dundee. And if you've ever seen Dundee, you'll know what a peculiar decision that must have been. The idea that anyone in their right mind could hate this beautiful country that God gave you, from sea to shining sea, with all its peoples, from all the corners of the earth, with all its achievements, is absurd. We are glad that we are two people